5 Americans whose extraordinary deeds were buried by history. 1. Bass Reeves, the legendary U.S. Marshal history forgot. Early life. Born in 1838 in Arkansas as a slave under an owner named William Reeves, was forced to work as a farmhand and a personal servant, learned horse riding, gun handling, and survival skills at a young age. Escaped to freedom. During the Civil War, he got into a physical conflict with his slave master and escaped. Fled to Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, where many Native American tribes lived. Lived among Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole people, learned their languages, customs, and tracking skills, becoming a lawman. In 1875, Judge Isaac Parker, the hanging judge, appointed him as one of the first black deputy U.S. Marshals. He worked in the most dangerous regions of the Wild West where gangs, murderers, and thieves freely roamed. Career highlights. Arrested over 3,000 criminals during his 32-year career. Captured some of the most notorious outlaws alive. Never shot an innocent person and had a reputation for honesty and discipline. Legend, rare facts. Often wore disguises and used brilliant tricks to fool criminals. Popular belief. The famous character, the Lone Ranger, was actually inspired by Reeves, but Reeves' contribution was hidden due to racism and Hollywood bias. 2. Robert Smalls, the slave who stole a warship and became a congressman. Early life. Born in 1839 in South Carolina, into slavery. Forced to work from childhood. Waiter, lamplighter, sailor, dock worker. The Incredible Escape, his most famous act. In 1862, during the Civil War, Smalls worked as a deckhand on a Confederate military ship called the Planter. He studied every movement of the ship's white officers. When they slept, Smalls took the helm. He disguised himself as the ship's captain, gathered his family and other enslaved families, and sailed the ship right past Confederate forts. Risk, if caught, he and his family would. Result, he delivered the ship to the Union Navy and gained freedom for 16 enslaved people. War and political career. Became a Civil War hero. Later entered politics, joining the South Carolina House of Representatives and then the U.S. Congress. Fought for education rights, equal political representation, civil rights for African Americans. Hidden impact. Helped draft state laws to create America's first public school system in South Carolina. His story was intentionally suppressed in the South during the Jim Crow era. 3. William Monroe Trotter, the journalist who challenged the president. Early life. Born in 1872 in Boston to a well-educated African-American family, graduated from Harvard with honors, one of the first black men to do so. The Guardian newspaper. In 1901, he founded The Guardian, a newspaper dedicated to exposing racism and segregation. He refused advertising from businesses he believed were racist. His writing was bold, fearless, and direct. Fight against racist policies. In 1914, Trotter confronted President Woodrow Wilson face-to-face in the White House over the government's segregation of federal offices. Wilson became angry and ended the meeting, but Trotter refused to stay silent. Civil rights activism. Organized protests, boycotts, and marches decades before the civil rights movement of the 1950s. Influenced future leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois and Martin Luther King Jr. Why he's forgotten. His strong methods led some mainstream organizations to distance themselves. History books later focused on more soft-spoken activists, overshadowing Trotter's radical courage. 4. Frank Kameny, the astronomer who launched the LGBTQ rights movement. Early life. Born in 1925 in New York. Earned a Ph.D. in astronomy from Harvard University, extremely rare for the time. Injustice that changed history. In 1957, he was fired from his government job simply because he was gay. At that time, homosexuality was considered a mental illness or crime. Historic activism. Instead of hiding, he started one of the first LGBTQ rights organizations in America. The Mattachine Society of Washington filed the first ever civil rights appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court about LGBTQ discrimination. Coined the phrase gay is good, inspired by black is beautiful. Protests and legacy. Organized some of the earliest LGBTQ picket lines outside the White House in the 1960s. Helped get homosexuality removed from the list of mental disorders in 1973. In 2009, the U.S. government issued a formal apology to him. Recognition. Many consider him the grandfather of the LGBTQ rights movement, yet very few people know his name. 5. Gordon Hirabayashi, the man who said no to Japanese internment camps.
Background.
Born in 1918 to Japanese immigrant parents in Seattle, was a college student at the University of Washington during World War II. The order he refused. After the Pearl Harbor attack, the U.S. government forced Japanese Americans into internment camps. Everyone had to obey curfews and report for imprisonment. But Gordon Hirabayashi said no. He refused the curfew, refused the camp orders, turned himself in, saying the orders violated the U.S. Constitution.
Court battle.
He was thrown in prison, appealed his case all the way to the Supreme Court, and lost in 1943. But he never gave up. Decades later, justice. In the 1980s, new documents proved the government had lied about the threat from Japanese Americans. Hirabayashi's conviction was overturned. Legacy. He stood alone during a time when even speaking out was dangerous. His fight helped America later apologize and compensate internment victims.